I've started recording these on my computer at home, and it's a Mac, and the microphone's a little bit more sensitive, so you do pick up a few noises in the background. So I apologise for that. You might be able to hear that right now. Actually, there's some drilling going on downstairs because we're having our kitchen fitted. But anyway, looking at the euro, and it's euro, eurozone, single currency, all the same meaning. And it's these countries which are countries within the EU. You have to be in the EU to have the euro. But these are countries who have signed up to a single currency, so they all have the same currency. And it's been around for a while, over 15 years, or just coming up to 15 years for the actual physical currency to have been circulating. And they're known as the Eurozone, these countries that have this currency. So to join it, you have to be part of the EU, but that's not enough in itself. You've got to have quite stable and controlled inflation. You've got to have your interest rate quite stable as well, and that's because that you might think, well, how can you control inflation if you're not allowed to, change your long-term interest rate to be out of sync with the three countries with the lowest interest rates? And the reason is because when you join, and I'll explain a little bit more of this later, when you join the euro, you lose your monetary policy power because your monetary policy is determined by the European Central Bank. So they want to see that you can control inflation without the use of your interest rate there. Government deficit, they don't want countries with large government deficits because this could make the Eurozone very unstable because once a government have a very big deficit, so this is the amount that the government is spending in excess of what, sorry, it's really loud. I think they're drilling into the wall at the moment, but this is the amount of money that they're spending in excess of what they're receiving in taxation. And countries that have large government deficits, it makes lenders think, is this country actually going to pay this money back, or are they going to default on their loans? So it causes a lot of uncertainty. And you also want a stable exchange rate so that it's really to symbolise that the economy is very stable and not volatile. Okay, so these are the conditions of joining, but Greece didn't meet all of these conditions actually, and they've got very large government deficit at the moment. I don't think their inflation was under control as well at that time, but you can look into whether they actually met this criteria or not. But I don't believe that they did meet this criteria, so that there was a little bit of flexibility on who joined. Anyway, there's a lot of text on this slide. I'm not going to read it out. I'm just going to pick three of the most important factors. But if you want to pause the presentation now and have a read through those, that's a good idea. But in my eyes, reasons for joining or for being in the euro. Hold on, Leon, I'm recording. Reasons for being in the euro are it's easier to trade with these European countries because. And so that, I mean, I'll go into some of the reasons because in a second, but that should mean that you have more demand. It's easier to access imports as well if you need to use them for raw materials. But that is because there's no transaction cost. So when you're exchanging money, you often have to pay commission, or even if you're going to a bank where they say we don't charge commission, what they tend to do is they buy and sell for different rates. So here are some kind of buying and selling rates, or selling and buying rates that are different from each other. So just have a look at that when you next go to the post office, or you're going anywhere that's buying that has a bureau de change in it, and you'll see that that's how they're, these are businesses as well, and that's how they're making their money. So if you're not having to change your currency, if you're trading, France is trading, a business in France is trading with a business in Germany, then you're not paying those transaction costs. So again, it's much easier. If we go back to kind of another reason why it's easier to trade with European countries, it's because the prices are very comparable. I know it's just, you just need to get your calculator out, really, don't you, when you're dealing with different currencies, or you're trying to buy something from a different country, but it doesn't make it as as easy for your mind to compute the differences and to really spot which is the cheapest company to go to. You have to do all these kind of calculations, and those calculations might be wrong if the exchange rate moves. So remember from the exchange rate presentation, if you have an appreciation or depreciation in your currency, it can benefit or disadvantage depending on whether you're an exporter or an importer. So depreciations in currencies benefit exporters, whereas appreciation in currencies benefit importers. So there's a lot of uncertainty. You might agree to do a deal, but by the time you exchange money, there's been some movement in the exchange rate. You may win, you may lose out from that. But with the euro, there's no difference in the currencies. So you're trading with somebody that has the same currency, so there's no kind of uncertainty of the deal. And uncertainty is not a great thing for businesses because it makes them very cautious, and it means that they may not do the deals that they would have, well, definitely wouldn't. They definitely won't do the deals that they would have done had there not been uncertainty there. And I think what's really a nice evaluative point is most of our trade does actually go to European countries, and a lot of our trade, a lot of our exporting and importing goes to countries based within the euro. So it would seem logical that you'd want to make those trades as easy and as cheap as possible for businesses. However, there are some serious disadvantages as well. So again, a lot of text here. Pause the presentation if you want to read through these. I've just picked 3 that are the most important. So this is very much a short-term cost, so a nice kind of way of evaluating this. And this is an old drachma, 1,000 drachma note, and as far as I can remember, this was worth around about £3. But when you transition over to a new currency, things have to be changed: computer systems, vending machines, till systems, and there are costs involved in that. So it's a short-term cost for businesses. Also, I'll just go on to this one. There is a tendency to round up prices rather than rounding them down. Now, there were rules imposed that said that businesses couldn't do that or they shouldn't do that, but it's hard to catch people doing that, really, because they could just say, oh no, prices, we were naturally going to put up the price at this point. So you get this inflationary, kind of cost push inflation in almost, even though I don't actually know what inflation you term it as because it's not actually real costs going up. But it causes inflation. Remember all the negative impacts that we get from inflation, such as menu costs, shoe level costs, your loss of purchasing power, lack of international competitiveness. But the biggest one in my eyes is this loss of monetary policy control. So remember, monetary policy is the control of the interest rate, and that can kind of heat up the economy or cool down the economy, and it's mainly used to control inflation. Now, when you join the euro, all countries in the eurozone have to have the same monetary policy. So the interest rate is controlled by the European Central Bank. Here's a picture, European Central Bank here. So they all have a collective interest rate. Now, not all the economies in the eurozone are that similar to each other, and some of them might be at different stages of the economic cycle. So when you're kind of heading on that kind of growth path, you're in a boom time, you may want to raise interest rates because the economy is overheating. And when you're in a slump or depression or recession, you're going to want to reduce your interest rates because you want to stimulate the economy. But what do you do if you've got one country that's in boom and one country that's in slump? Like, how do you please both of them? And it is very, very difficult to try and control the economy if you've got so many diverse economies within the eurozone, which we do have at the moment. So we have really strong economies like Germany, and we have weaker economies like Greece, who are having a really tough time at the moment. So those are the arguments for and against. My biggest tip for this would be look at which ones are short term and which ones are long term, because they're not, this one's very much a long term one, whereas the transitional costs, that's more of and the tendency to round up prices, those are more short term costs for the business.